Welcome to everybody that is joining us for a conversation with Andrea Brown. Andrea has truly a remarkable background. She's someone that I've had the distinct pleasure of getting to know recently, and each of the conversations that I've had with Andrea not only allows me to just learn a tremendous amount, but also really has sparked a lot of creative thinking about the work that we do at Climate Club. So I'm Adam Braun. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Climate Club. We are an operational sustainability platform. We work with large, complex organizations, some of the largest in the world, to really help them take their climate ambitions out of a silo, out of paper commitments, and really look to operationalize those goals and embed them across a business in a variety of ways. So today's conversation is particularly exciting for both myself and I know so many of those that are attending because of the topic. We've covered a wide variety of topics, but today is really going to be about embedding sustainability into your operations. But Andrea, I think it would be helpful, perhaps if you can start with a little bit of your background, as I know you've held a number of roles and in fact been a critical architect and one of the primary standards and frameworks that all of us use and leverage today.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks for inviting me. Super happy to be here, and yeah, wonderful to sort of speak with you over the next 30 minutes or so. So I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer at the company Lionel Bozells, a company many people have probably not heard of. We're not a B2C company. We're a large petrochemical company. We can talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but very much a global company. I lead sustainability there. But I started my career in government. Actually, I started my career in international relations. Frankly, I wanted to go save the world working for the UN or something like that. But I think what spoke to me in that particular space was really around kind of this connection of like multilateral organizations and how they can be instrumental in helping solve some of these big challenges. And so I was always interested in sustainability, but I didn't work directly in it. But I worked in government from an international kind of focused role into energy policy, and then made a pivot to the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, the WBCSD, of which many people in sustainability know. And I spent 10 years there. So it was really sort of learning by doing. I joined that organization to support the Greenhouse Gas Protocol Scope 3 standards, so a partnership with the World Resources Institute. And then I stayed there because I think that project for me was so instrumental in sort of how I thought about the role of business, frankly, in sustainability, and therefore working with companies within the context of the WBCSD was just such an exciting place to be. So from 2008 to 18, and also very interesting time from kind of this transition to CSR to really embedding sustainability and driving value in large and companies of all size from a sustainability lens. And then of course I transitioned over to Lionel Bozells kind of just before the pandemic. So that's my career in a nutshell, I would say.
So today's conversation is really focused on a number of areas. One of those kind of key components that I know folks are so curious to hear about from fellow leaders is a little of their historical journey that led to the present moment. And so, I think one of the pieces that, we had referenced in just a little bit of learning about your background and sharing that out in advance of today's conversations was, your role in helping to craft the Greenhouse Gas Protocol Scope 3 standard. So we'd love for you to share a little bit about what did you learn going through that process and what surprises you most about how they are playing out today?
I mean, I think the big thing, probably the most obvious was just this kind of how to collaborate, how to navigate those different perspectives, how to find a common thread. I think, that wasn't easy. I didn't know how to do that, but I sort of had to learn, it was sort of sink or swim because we had this enormous process, and I kind of dove right into it. And I think, we had a lot of fantastic energy around the table, frankly, from all these different perspectives: NGOs, business, government, scientific community. And I think everybody sort of wanted, we spent a lot of time kind of at the front end of that process trying to figure out where we wanted to go. And I think that that's always an important
Mm,
learning in any of these is, you know, that sort of front piece of the puzzle is very important. If we're not all aligned around a goal, it's just not gonna, you know, you're not gonna be able to move through the really challenging parts of any process. And so that kind of how to collaborate, I think, was frankly the biggest learning out of that. And then just, you know, the value of different stakeholder perspectives, because you know, I think if that was just a bunch of private sector companies sitting around the table, you know, you probably wouldn't have the uptake that you have today through, you know, in terms of the acceptance of the scope 3
mm,
protocol by so many different entities. And of course, it's not perfect, right? So we're on the end of that, of course, as in the company I sit with now is, you know, there's obviously challenges with that, but I think just the collaboration and the ability to pull those different perspectives together to end in a result that people could buy into from different sides of the table was just a huge learning for me.
mm. And switching gears, you know, you're now the chief sustainability officer at one of the largest chemical companies in the world. Can you share a bit about what your job entails and how do you break down your scope of responsibilities?
Yes. It's so many different things. So I
Yeah.
think anybody in sustainability knows it's like we're like Swiss Army knives. But
Mm,
I think, you know, at the very start of this, and I would say kind of one of the challenges I think with any sustainability role is your role kind of evolves over time as well, right? So the front end of our role over the last few years has really been about setting ambition and strategy at a corporate level, right? So sort of top down, what are the expectations from stakeholders? What are the standards out there that help, you know, help us define, for example, a corporate climate goal around scope 1 and 2, and then bottom up, you know, how do we get there? And so that sort of ambition and strategy piece has obviously been a huge part of the scope of work for myself and my team. And we're sort of now pivoting to, you know, making sure that that we're aligned across all of these groups across the company that are focused on the on achieving our goals, and how do we make sure that we're embedding this in something that sort of sticks. So that's
mm,
a sort of different way of working. Right now we're focused on sort of driving implementation, driving alignment, embedding, change
mm,
management, et cetera. And then, you know, we're also focused on external engagement. So how do we also raise our profile around what we're doing externally? Where do we feel that will be leveraging for the company in terms of obviously not only sustainability, but of course the business strategy? And then where do we need to be going sort of deeper and wider? And so, you know, maybe wider efforts around activities that perhaps are sort of more immature today. So we're very much focused on sort of corporate strategy, implementing, aligning across the company, making sure governance processes are strong, and then of course the wider ESG strategy. So how do we also make sure that we're communicating to the market through not only our sustainability report, but also our ESG ratings, and, you know, the ratings we of course choose to participate in. Where do we want to be differential, of course, across those ratings, because we believe it will be helpful for us in terms of our corporate strategy and our communication to investors in particular.
got it. Got it. And one thing, as I kind of progressed through a number of questions that I wanted to ask, I also wanted to encourage our audience members. There is a chat, like many of us have experienced with Zoom feature. And so both chat and the Q&A section, as we're having today's discussion, feel free to just pop any questions into either the chat or the Q&A. And I will make sure that I try and identify and bring those into either the ongoing questions as we progress through this conversation. We'll also plan to leave time at the end to draw out as many of those questions that get populated into the Q&A as possible. And I'll also, just so that folks know where to find the chat, I'll drop in a link to a state of sustainability survey that we've surfaced as a company, that if anybody's in the corporate sustainability seat looking to learn from others, hopefully it's a way to both share and identify opportunities to surface best practices. So When it comes to the journey that you've experienced with the company, I'd love to hear. I think it's always helpful for those that are in the audience coming to a webinar like this one. There's always a desire to learn, and recognizing that it is a step-by-step progression. I think it'd be helpful for folks to hear a little bit about what was the state of sustainability and where were the initiatives at when you started, and what was your process through which you went about identifying, prioritizing, and tackling the primary challenges you're focused on today?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, when I joined, it was about 3.5 years ago. I would say Lionel Bozells as a company was relatively quiet on sustainability. We certainly had some activities, we had some goals, not so many at the corporate level. So I would say we had already, however, we had already leaned in, I would say, within the circularity space. So, our company, we're a significant player in the polymer space, petrochemical space. So we produce polymers that go into packaging, into durables, into automotive, healthcare, et cetera. So, of course, the business criticality of moving towards circularity had already surfaced. But I think we were, much like many global companies, we were working on projects and activities in Europe and hadn't yet really taken the step of having a corporate goal, particularly for that space. And so I think when I joined the company, the timing was right to sort of evaluate where do we want to go in terms of 2030, and how can we start to carve out our direction of travel, our beliefs, and kind of where we think we need to land in terms of corporate goals as they relate to maybe more long-term 2030. So I went in and I built a small working team that was supported by a number of our executive team to kind of help me work through and navigate how we wanted to land what we called belief statements and then goals. And so belief statements being statements that we believe are important from a values perspective as it relates to things like climate, circularity, product sustainability, operational safety, et cetera. So leveraging some of what we had, of course, in the safety side, and then, helping advance some of that from things like climate, and other topics that were important to the business. And that kind of provided a bit of an anchor point and a direction of travel that then we could start to build this kind of top-down, bottom-up approach to goals, and working very closely with the business to help identify the value from, changing customer demands that we could then translate into specific goals. So it's, that was, on a very general level, that's sort of the process that I took, and very much, in partnership with the business, in partnership with, groups across the company to make sure that that was a collaborative process that leaders understood to be anchored in where we needed to go and where we thought we could also add value, of course, to the business.
And many companies start with measurement, then set aggressive targets, and then feel the challenge of figuring out how to make progress towards those goals. And we hear that quite consistently in our conversations with both sustainability leaders and functional leaders. What advice would you give to those leaders trying to figure out how to make progress towards their goals that go beyond measurement and into action?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think this is an area that's always a challenge when you're in sustainability. You want to set ambitious goals, but they also have to be based in reality, right? So I think, and the chemical industry, frankly, is fairly conservative, right? We've also been very thoughtful about the goals that we've put out there. We haven't just laid out a goal without having, a view of how we get there. Certainly the cost of getting there is also part of the evaluation. And I think that helps. Certainly, we have 100 manufacturing sites around the world. So if we just put out ambitious goals and didn't engage with that community in terms of like, how are we going to get there? What sorts of projects do we need on these different sites, these different sorts of sites with these different technologies, that wouldn't be very credible externally, and it also would be tricky to sell internally in terms of our pathway forward. So we've been very, collaborative in that approach, and I think most companies are doing that now, I hope. And I think there's so much need to be very accountable and transparent around your sustainability efforts that the sort of scrutiny around that is important. And I think in terms of action for us, we link as much to business value as possible. So we believe that we can build a profitable circular and low carbon business. We've communicated that as our corporate strategy, a few months ago. And when we start to describe that to people, why are we doing these things? How do they connect to customer demand? How do they connect to market dynamics? How do they connect to what we're seeing as these long-term trends? Then we do get a lot of buy-in. And I think that at the end of the day, what I find almost, I don't want to say surprising, but it's fantastic to see how much engagement we have on these goals that we've communicated. And in many areas of the company that I find surprising sometimes, just how much people are engaged and committed to understanding how they can contribute to sustainability. And so I think leveraging as much as you can on that dynamic and that cultural shift is also part of how any company can be successful, because you can have all these plans, but you also need the culture and mindset shift to get there.
Yeah, I mean, I think from our previous conversations together, one of those unique components that really stood out to me, which is why I was so excited to have you as a guest on this leadership series on this topic in particular, has been your success in embedding sustainability into the company operations. And, I think part of what is oftentimes necessary is certainly the buy-in, the support, the empowerment from the, counterparts. It might be the board, it might be the CEO of the company, but I'd be curious just to support the learnings, the journey, and the evolution of those that are going to watch this and then look to implement key components of what's enabled you to find success. I'd love for you to unpack a little bit of, some of the things that you would encourage others to adapt, or at least target both in the near term as well as the long term, to be able to replicate a similar strategy to the one that you've deployed.
So I would also say, I don't know what successes I told you, because we're clearly in the journey of this process of embedding. And we also, we've got a lot to learn, of course, as we progress on our journey as well. But I would say we sort of have a philosophy that I think has been successful. And I think many companies have this philosophy. I don't think this is unique to us at all, but, we're very much this kind of hub and spoke approach around sustainability. So we have a relatively small team. Our team is growing, which is fantastic, but we will always, we're never going to be this massive size. And I think we want to embed the execution of our goals in the right part of the company, because that's where, frankly, the expertise is. So we help essentially translate what's happening in the outside world. We help use that translation to define goals that are credible, that we can achieve. We help communicate that performance to the market, but we are not in the lead when it comes to execution. And so, we've partnered very closely with finance on the implementation of our controls around our ESG data. We work very closely with procurement on our sustainable procurement efforts. We work very closely with our circular and low carbon business as it relates to the execution of the circularity goal that we've put out there. So, and of course, we're in the lead on certain engagements, on certain strategic alliances, and helping support and define, where we want to help position the company on certain topics. But when it comes to execution, it's this real network of groups across the company that are going to be critical to the success and, frankly, the speed at which we need to move, right? So So I think that that's kind of the philosophy, and that's worked pretty well. And I think that's worked pretty well because we've also kind of co-created a lot of the goals with those different parts of the company. We've brought those groups in early. We've shared our knowledge, they've shared theirs, and we've sort of worked collectively towards what that corporate strategy and then an implementation plan looks like. And so I think that's been helpful. And I mean, as I said, we're very much on a journey as well. We're going to have to adjust as we go, just like everybody else. But I do think that sort of philosophy has been helpful for us to also not get lost in things that maybe we're not ready to execute yet because the business or functional group's just not ready yet. And so we got to park something for a little while we get maybe more resources or more learning or whatever that may be into the right part of the company.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on this a bit, which is just how the work of driving real action across a business is remarkably cross-functional.
Yeah.
And I'd love for you to share any tips or best practices that you've learned in leading these initiatives that require you to work with folks whose historical day job isn't primarily focused on sustainability. And in particular, are there any specific functional groups that you tend to work most closely with in driving these cross-functional initiatives?
Yeah, I think I'd say there's a few things that we're in the process of that I think we're also, by the way, learning from other companies that have been doing this for a bit longer than we have that I think are helpful. So one is governance. So one of the things we found is that as we created goals, we had lots of working groups and steering teams all over the place. And at a certain point, it became, we needed to reevaluate what was the best governance approach to be the most efficient moving forward. And so we've looked at that and sort of said, well, we need, a group that comes together to make sure that we're aligned across the company as we're moving forward and that we're clear kind of where we're at on all of these goals, much more frequently than, of course, an annual reporting cycle, which is what we do externally. So that is something that, us and many companies are, of course, implementing is sort of a strong governance process around that integrated approach and making sure that group comes together frequently enough that you add value for everybody that's sitting around the table. And it's not just the sustainability person sort of giving a long overview update, but everybody's got some sort of skin in the game. So I think that's an area for us that's been valuable to establish. I also have a role in my team that I find it's interesting because I have a lot of friends, of course, in sustainability, and I get a lot of questions about this role, which is Director, Sustainability Integration. And I think, this was partly a recognition that I'm not the best at process or following process. I'm great at thinking about process. I'm not the best at following process. And I think that's helpful sometimes, but of course, as you mature as a function, you need to also mature those processes. And so I hired somebody who came from health, safety and environment, who is extremely strong on process. And of course, as a petrochemical company, we have very embedded processes as it relates to things like HSE. And so can we take that learning, that mindset, that type of role and apply it in sustainability? And so we're doing that, and we're finding really tremendous value in that role, kind of, this colleague identifying gaps, helping establish processes, not over engineering it, but really, how do we make this much more efficient overall by putting some processes in place that perhaps were not there before in the earlier part of our journey. So I think those are two things that we're doing that are very sort of practical that I think we're already starting to see some traction with. And then I think you asked about who we work very closely with. I'd say we work very closely with finance, which I think is, I don't want to say unique, but I think certainly this is part of our success is we absolutely need them at the table, speaking the same language, understanding the value, that helps kind of grease the wheel, frankly, when it comes to certain decisions that need to be made as a company. So that's one kind of functional group that we work very, very closely with. And then, of course, we work, I would say, with our business and our manufacturing sites as well, across, for example, climate, where, we have 100 sites. Of course, we're focused on how that will be executed across the operations we have that are really around the world. So we work with many groups, but I'd say those are two where we're very, very connected.
Fantastic. It's super, super, super helpful, I think, for anyone who is in a similar context, trying to identify who are those key stakeholders that they can and should partner with most closely. So I want to turn it over to some of the audience questions that have been submitted. We have a number, so I'll ask for, to the extent possible, a little bit of a lightning round so I can move through as many as time allows. So first one coming in from Laurel. Laurel asked, what types of tools or technologies are essential for a mature sustainability program's tech stack on the corporate side?
Yeah, I'd say we're evaluating a number. So I would say we don't have all the answers. We do use Datamaran right now. We use Intellex, but we know that there's more tools out there. So obviously Climate Club is one. And, we don't have all the answers yet, but I think certainly the piece around climate for us is going to be a tricky one as we move through the process of accessing all of that data that is at many different sites around the world and many different processes, frankly, within those sites. So the complexity of that one, we're still evaluating what's the right tool for us as we move forward. So it's a tricky one.
Agreed. Fortunately, there is a fantastic amount of talent that is building solutions for this enterprise sustainability stack. And so I think, Laurel, it's a great question, and we'll continue to see new and dynamic and incredibly effective tools emerging in the space. So my good friend James, a fellow global head of sustainability at an enterprise company, he asked, with a global organization, how do you balance alignment /compliance with corporate strategy, policies, guidelines, et cetera, and the unique circumstances that different parts of your business face in their specific business lines, markets, or geographies?
I don't know how we're going to answer that question in a lightning round. It's a complex one, but I mean, I would say one of the key things that we find to be very valuable is what's the corporate level position on a particular topic. And it's not, who holds the pen on that can be different groups, but it's, what's our position on certain topics, and then how do we use that to anchor, which could be like advocacy in one region that's very specific versus maybe in the EU it looks a bit different, but the corporate position really does help us anchor some of those activities, and that is a collaborative process for sure. So that has been an area for us that's been helpful.
Fantastic. And another question came in: how do you educate teams about sustainability /ESG issues that are relevant to them?
Yeah, I think we're doing a mix right now of designing our own material and then also tapping into some of the existing training material that's out there. And then, as a large company like ours, we have a very good learning and development platform. So we are actually, that's a role within sustainability at the moment, partnering with our learning and development to define more precisely sort of, if you're sitting in procurement, what does sustainability mean for you? So we have those materials that we've developed sort of through our unique approach to sustainability and then translating that through our learning and development process.
Great. And final last quick question. Jason asked a detailed question on the greenhouse gas protocol's evolution, but to pull out one element of that, in what ways do you see that needing to further adapt or evolve?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a big discussion ongoing at the moment. So I know that there's been some funding awarded to help update the greenhouse gas protocol, and I think the sort of theory behind that, at least in the early days, was that every standard, even ISO standards, et cetera, they all kind of go through a review process periodically. And so indeed, as our own evolution on all of these things evolves, so do these standards. So I think certainly I would agree with that.
Great. Well, I recognize we're at time. We do try and keep these to 30 minutes. So I just want to say thank you on behalf of not only myself, but also all of those that have joined us today or will watch this on demand at a future date. So thank you for all the great work you're doing, and thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today as well.
Thanks for inviting me, Adam. Thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.